Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox, and I'm here with all of the market news for the last week in Eve Online. We're going to start where we usually do, which is to some of the news, some of the show news. Going to keep this one pretty brief. One, if you want to tune into the show, all you got to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. If you want to support the show directly, please stop by our Patreon at patreon.com/eveprosper. The support there really does mean a lot. Moving on the, if you regularly tune into the show, you know we stream on Fridays at 0300. We will not have a show next week due to it being Thanksgiving here in the States. I will not be at my machine. Unfortunately, I will be seeing my family, who I miss very dearly, but there will be a market maker interview released next week. We have one in the chamber from a prominent drug manufacturer, and that should be released on Monday, as long as things go well. So you'll have content from us to listen to regardless. Let's go ahead and move on to the main show. There was not a ton of in-game news this week. There was an 07 show today, but they aren't sharing a whole ton. The big news here is Operation Frostline, which is going to be a continuation in spirit of the Bloody Omir's event that CCP did at the end of October. That looks like they have a lot planned to go basically through the entire month of December, and there's a lot of cool stuff that's been popping up off the test server, and they did tease some information, but not a lot of details. So as I learn more, I will share it with you guys. Beyond that, there's a bunch of in-game skirmishes that have been going on lately, but not a lot of major news as far as huge fights or huge losses, other than the Imperium is on the march to Losec for good fights or something. More news on that as I can put it into something that fits the show a little bit better. Give you guys some graphs to go behind it. With that, let's just go straight into Plex. Just cut straight to the meat of it. Plex has stayed really stable right around that 1.2 mark for the last few weeks, and we're seeing a quick blip up ahead of Thanksgiving. I'm going to reiterate the same advice I've been giving for the last few weeks, is that I expect prices to stay stable at 1.2, and I expect them to come down for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, especially if the new Frostline event comes with a Plex sale. Expect prices to dip down. So if you need a Plex, I would try my hardest to hold off. If you're looking to sell Plex, I think this is going to be the best chance you get for the next 6 weeks. So getting out right about now would probably be a good idea. If you're looking to buy in, I would be waiting at least 2 weeks, maybe for Cyber Monday, maybe for Christmas. Those are going to be your 2 big days to buy in. If we look at the 1 year view, again, things have been really stable right around that 1.2 mark. Again, we're staying very high compared to the rest of the year, but the longer we stay at 1.2, the closer we get to this straight line we saw over the summer, which I'm largely okay with. I know that CCP has expressed concern that they want it to be lowered, but to get there requires it's going to require some more work, and we'll talk more about that as news comes out that might change the equation. So, but in the meantime, keep an eye out for Plex sales. I kind of expect it to dip down to 1.1 billion, but it's hard to predict exactly what the deals are going to be and how far the market will move. Moving on to the RMT token markets, again, things are staying really stable. We're seeing the margins on multiple pilot training certificates have been dwindling over the last few weeks. We saw in the last few months that the buy and sell margins of these multiple pilot training certificates have stayed pretty wide around Plex, but we've been seeing that delta narrow thanks to the changes to buy orders. buy order mechanics, and probably that people are getting wiser about rotating through items. So we're seeing this market become far more efficient. We're still seeing spikes in the resculpt certificates, but I really don't think those get used very much, so I may even remove them at some point. We'll probably, once the transneural skill packets get announced, we'll probably replace that with equivalent version of the transneural skill packet. This is adjusted for RM value. Next, if we look at the buy and sell deltas, I said last week that the deltas were pretty wide, and we've seen them narrow. As the price trends upward. Again, I expect things to peak out this weekend, but I'd be really, really careful about getting on this hype train. This is going to be a good chance for sellers to get out, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.25 billion. But as far as buyers go, I would hold off until Cyber Monday, because if you're patient, you may be able to get some buy orders sub 1.1 billion. And then if we check our prediction, which again, if you've been watching for the last couple of weeks, you notice I'm cheating, that I moved the time 0 point to the 45-day moving average from the 60. From the 60 to the 30. And we're right inside the bounds. Again, I had tried to account for Black Friday sales dipping down, again, to that 1.1 billion mark. We're right here in the band I expect to be in. We're tracking this medium green line pretty well. Pretty happy with the way things are going. Moving on to minerals. Minerals are going to be, I thought were going to be more interesting than they are. So first, titanium is on a rise, and if you guys had been watching the forums, CCP announced that Amber is getting a boost. They are adding more titanium and pyrite to the refining mix. And what I actually expected this to do was down titanium and pyrite prices, because this will lead to not a huge oversupply, not a huge increase in supply, but a moderate one that's at least statistically significant, and the price has been trending up over 6.4. I expect the prices to come back down to near 6.2, maybe stay around 6.25. But again, things are not behaving the way I expected them. And if we zoom into the buy and sell prices, I didn't get the chance to put the dotted line on the announcement, but we keep seeing that prices are trending up. It looks like consumption is staying relatively healthy, even with lowered volumes. The behavior just is strange. Moving on to pyrite, again, we're seeing the opposite of what I expected. I was expecting the price to slump down to 11.2, maybe go just a little south of that, but we've seen it trend up towards 11.5. Again, I gotta lean on the expectation that this will wash out to lower prices, but this might take a couple of weeks to really wash out. I did sort of poke at CCP over Twitter this week just to sort of try and gauge his thoughts on what adding that extra titanium and pyrite would do, but he was coy and was not answering my questions. So if we do the zoom in again, the picture's pretty noisy, and we're not really seeing the downward pressure I expected. I really did expect this line to continue down to 11.0, but I may not be right on this one. Moving on to Mexilon, we're seeing it stay very steady, but slightly down at about 64, 65. Again, probably the last time I'm going to be able to use this graph, but we see it stay relatively stable, not a ton of movement in buy or sells. I still think that this will get more interesting once the fax requirements come out. So this is a good chance to buy in again if you want to make a long-term investment, but trying to hit that target of 70 again, I think might be hard to do at this point. Again, things are a little bit muddy. It's a little hard to predict right this second. Moving on to Isogen, again, we saw a small bump. Again, Isogen is the most valuable commodity that comes out of Amber. And again, for getting a slight buff in the getting a slight buff in the quantity received, we're seeing a slight bump in the prices in the opposite direction we'd expect. So right now it's at 115. I still expect it to hit about 112. I don't expect it to move hugely. There isn't a ton of Isogen in Amber. Moving on to Noxium, again, we're still seeing positive pressure there. We're now just above 500. Again, I do sort of expect this to get overmined, but we may have to wait until late December, early January for that pressure to come back on. No reason to think it will. I don't think it'll climb much higher, but 500 is a pretty decent price. Zydrene, we mentioned that there was a decent price spike, and no volume to really back it up, and we've seen the prices come crashing back down. Again, I still don't think that this is a buy north of 1,000, but that might be that I think that there's more sway in this over longer periods. So if you think that there's going to be some more demand, especially with Imperium heading to low sec, and if that dries up some of the supply, this might be a decent chance to buy in over the month of December just to ride the waves, but I don't think that it's going to be hard to make money beyond taxes on this one. And then Megasite continues its slide down to 1,300. And again, this is right on track with what we've been saying for the last month. And last is Morphite, which is bouncing around 11K. I think 11K is a decent floor, but with the recent heat in some of the Tech 2 ships we're going to look at, we might be seeing a resurgence. So now is a great chance to stockpile if you need Morphite to build stuff, especially if you're a Tech 2 ship producer. And then last, we just have the buy and sell margins on everything. We see a dip in the buy orders on Isogen. We see a dip in the buy orders on Megasite, but everything else is staying relatively stable. Moving on to fuel. Fuel markets have been weird. We saw helium isotopes looks like a buyout. I don't know if this is a wormhole invasion or if this is ahead of the Imperium invasion, which again, that seems like the wrong kind of fuel to be buying if they're doing that. I kind of expect them to base off of low-sec stations, so I don't see why they would need POS fuel, but that's just what the numbers say. Again, things are looking relatively stable. We're still seeing the price of blocks climb up, and again, I think this is driven by some heat in the PI markets, but not. I think this is still overstating it at the moment. I think that this margin drying up is getting a little too narrow compared to the remaining gulf between isotope prices. So if you are a block producer, now's a great chance to sell into this weekend. I wouldn't expect Caldari isotopes to rise. I'd expect everything else to fall back down under the 18K mark. Another interesting piece that was going on is heavy water and liquid ozone spiked over the week. And I want to thank Sekatur in the Prosper Slack channel. These look like there was some sort of buyout ahead of net last weekend, and now the prices have reset pretty hard. But the volumes aren't particularly outstanding, so I don't know if this is that ice mining is halting in Imperium space, supply is getting constricted, which again seems crazy. That seems like a terrible justification. We also saw a blip in liquid ozone, not as pronounced as heavy water, but we saw it go from 460 to 500 basically overnight with a big buyout. Again, it's hard to predict exactly what's going on here. I have not had my ear to the ground on this, and I'm not sure what precisely is driving it. Moving on to outlier analysis, we're going to start where we always do with advanced materials. Things have been same story as last week. We see fermionic condensates falling still. We see weakness in the middle with phenolic composites trending very slightly down. Also, nanotransistors trending down. Also, fulleриdes trending weakly down. We still see relative strength in the carbonides and instability in the metamaterials. I expect the metamaterials, though, to start picking up, especially the Minmatar and Amar ones, with the way that heavy interdictors are going at the moment. Heavy interdictors and heavy assault cruisers. There's a lot of heat in those markets at the moment, and those will be reflected in their appropriate metamaterials. Moving on to Moon Goo, we saw a big dip in technetium going from just over 9K down almost to 7K. Not sure if this is just a temporary blip or if this is some supply snafus, since Sov fights tend to be happening at money moons these days versus sovereignty stuff. So that's interesting. Again, I would expect this to ripple back up through nanotransistors. So if you are building nanotransistors, expect this blip to hit you next week. It would be a good chance to stock up, though, if you need it. Moving on, I think this is the last week we're going to include this graph as well, the PI4 market. Thanks to the Citadel announcements, looks like P4s were going to be in high demand, and looks like the prices basically set themselves and have not really moved from there. The prices are up, but not as high as I expected, and I sort of actually expected more action to happen as people were trying to stockpile enough of these to get Citadels out once they launch. But without a concrete release day, we may not see that action happen until after the new year. So if you're adventurous, it might be a decent chance to get in on recursive computing modules and self-harmonizing power cores, and maybe watch the integrity response drone markets, looking for those down blips to sort of stockpile as we expect to see CCP lock in a release date somewhere in January. Also looking at the PI markets, enriched uranium is down big time. Again, not sure if this is a sell-off or what exactly is going on here. I have a hard time believing that this price will stick around. So if you need to buy enriched uranium now, like this second, is the very best time to do it. Try to stockpile ahead of the weekend while the prices are low. I expect this to bounce right back to the 10.5 mark, where it's been bouncing around for the last week or so. Mechanical parts are also down in a big way. Again, I think this is going to stay stable at 10K. I think we just overshot the top of this. Not really. I don't think this is really going to go either way. I think it's going to just stay stable. Again, looking at the salvage graphs, again, I think I need to clean these up and so we can talk about just specific parts of it. We had seen some heat in the titanium bars, which have trended back down again. And are looking unstable. Also, contaminated nanite compound was up and is trending back down. And a lot of things that were hot are starting to lose some heat. So if you have Ward consoles, this would be a great chance to be selling them off, I think. These markets look like they're going to become unstable in the coming weeks until we actually get more information released on what's going to be consuming these. And then keeping an eye on the Tech 2 market. Again, the same trends we saw last week have been holding. The Ward consoles are staying high. Artificial neural networks are staying high. Telemetry processors are staying high. This is a great chance if you're in Tech 2 salvage to be moving these around, because it looks like the prices are staying relatively stable, unlike in the Tech 1 markets. Next, this was an interesting one to include. The Proteus seems to be the tool of choice now for the Imperium invasion, and so we saw a quick blip on that. We're still also seeing blips on the Legion and the Tengu. So again, if you're in Tech 3 production, it's a pretty decent chance to be turning up those manufacturing lines again. The prices aren't quite up to the 200 million mark, but if things stay hot and heavy, we might actually see some more action over the course of December. So keep a close eye on Tech 3 cruisers. Next, the other interesting one that came out of the analysis was the Manticore is trending up pretty significantly. All of the prices on this graph have been normalized, so we see that the Hound, the Nemesis, and the Purifier are staying pretty stable at their 17.5 marks, but the Manticore is on track to go to 22.5, so if you're, again, in the Tech 2 ship market, Manticores are a great place to be working right now. We may also see the Nemesis come around, but that's kind of a weak prediction. Moving on to hacks, again, we're seeing heat come back to the Cerberus as it peaks up over 200. The Vagabond was looking popular before the patch, before Parallax, and has been tracking down since, but the Zealot continues to remain popular, being extremely bouncy. If you can produce in any decent quantity, the Zealot is going to treat you pretty well, especially if you're willing to be patient to ride some of those peaks. Not sure exactly who's using them where, but they are a hot commodity at the moment. Moving into the T3D market, where we're looking at the Confessor at the moment, took a big bounce up. We were expecting things to stay relatively flat through Parallax, with the ability to use these in small faction warfare plexes being removed. But the Confessor continues to be an all-star, and if you're producing them or have a stockpile, now would be a great chance to sell them. I don't know if this heat over 60 million is going to stay around through the weekend. Again, I expect things to kind of come down over Thanksgiving. It would be a great chance to buy into some of your more needed things, seeing as things will get pretty quiet in game over the next week. Another interesting one that was peaking up is the Demos, which is an interesting choice. I don't see many of these out in the wild, but lately it looks like they've become relatively popular. There may have been a production crunch that is causing the prices to go this high, so I would keep an eye on the price to dip below 170 or maybe go down to 150. If producers overstretch demand, we may see some instability in the next 2 weeks on this one. Next, an interesting one, especially given the new Command Destroyer news, is that Hictors have been very popular since Eve Vegas. We've seen the Broadsword tick up in price. We've seen the Devoter tick up in price. The Onyx is trending down, mostly because it's a brick and terrible. And the Phobos has stayed relatively stable. Seeing as this will be a decent counter utility to the Command Destroyers, I expect heavy interdictors to become a little more popular. This is a great chance to produce them. They tend to be kind of a pain in the butt to produce. As I've said in the past, I know that most people, this one has bitten me in the ass a few times, where the prices look really good, but by the time I've gone to market, 3 or 4 other guys got the same idea I did and crashed the market before I even got there. So as a producer, be cautious, but I think there's some decent opportunities to make some money, especially on things like the Broadsword. Next, the Apocalypse Navy issue is also tracking up. Again, volumes are very thin here, so I don't know if this is an LP faucet turning off or actual demand kicking it over the 450 million mark. With the tournament over, I kind of expected this to go back to its regular spot, but looks to be popular this week. The Munin is another ship that has been popular the last couple of weeks. It flagged last week, but I didn't include it because of this steep tail. I thought that we were going to crash right back down to 120 million, but we recovered again. Looks like somebody might be propping up the market at the moment, though. So if you're a producer, I would still steer clear of the Munin. Another interesting one, just because the movement is so sharp. Especially given the expectation that there's going to be a new ice mining frigate, is the ice harvesting Yeti implant is tracking down sharply. It looks like somebody burned off their stockpile. Again, the volumes on this are extremely low. We're looking at about 15 a day, but the prices are as cheap as you're going to get them. So if you are in need of these Yeti implants, I would be going and getting them, especially since this is the 5% module. If you're looking to do some ninja ice mining or just some regular ice mining, especially given that it seems that if Imperium is stopping their stuff to come romp around in Losec, there might be some opportunities to go be mining Caldari ice in the meantime. So that I found rather interesting. And then I believe this is the last one for this week, is the Caldari Navy coprocessor is down significantly. It looks like faction warfare guys went and crashed the market. So if you were holding this would be a chance to get out. I don't know if anybody really needs them for their fits, but now would be a great chance to buy in, especially if you're expecting to counterplay the faction warfare guys. This is a great chance to get in on the play. Now on to the last segment of the show where we talk about the hits and misses from the last week or so. We're going to look again at the Gecko, which we've been keeping a close eye on. It just dipped under 80 million ahead of the show tonight. Again, my advice here has been wait until 70 if you want to invest in the long term. 80 is a great price if you need them now, but with the way that Gilas have been moving, and the fact you can't use them on the fact that their use on carriers getting sunsetted here in the near future. This party's going to come to an end pretty soon. Another interesting one we've been tracking is the Dramiel. Continues to be extremely popular. Again, I have a hard time talking about exactly where it's going to move at the moment, now that it's north of 40. Again, it's always been north of 40, sorry. Now that the prices are north of 45, it's hard to tell exactly where this is going. Again, volume has been extremely healthy, and if you can at all get your hands on these things through buy orders, there might be some decent chances to make some money, but it's in an extremely unstable spot at the moment. And it's hard to tell you guys exactly where we're going to go in the next couple of weeks because, again, such a dramatic price increase tends to be unstable. And then one I didn't include in the main show today, but we'll keep an eye on, is chromium. It's down pretty significantly, but chromium, I believe, is an R8, which it means that it tends to be a little more unstable. It's a little easier to get your hands on. This would be a great chance to stockpile if you're using it in your reactions, but I don't think that it really warrants highlighting in the main show, because I don't think that this is going to really drive the prices of anything other than maybe the appropriate carbide, which I think I want to say it's tungsten carbide, but I'm not sure. Anyway, that makes a show for the week. I want to thank everybody who tuned in live. Again, if you want to tune into this show, all you got to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. If you get value out of this show, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Eve Prosper. That really does help keep the lights on and drive development under the hood. We won't have a show next week due to it being Thanksgiving here in the United States, but we will be back the following week at the same time slot, Friday 0300. Also, keep tuned to the blog and YouTube because our next market maker interview will be released next week. So don't worry, there will be content for you in the meantime. Thanks again, everyone who tuned in live. I've been your host, Lockefox. This has been the Eve Prosper Market Show, and I will see you all in a couple of weeks.